Hey, what's up everybody? Tarafdar back with a brand new video. Today we're going to talk about bankruptcy. There's a reason why I want to talk about this is because a lot of people are considering bankruptcy, especially during these hard times. It's becoming a very important part of their financial infrastructure. But before you make that decision, there are some things that I want you to consider because this is going to be a very sensitive decision and I don't want you to make a mistake. So if you're interested in learning more about this and what are some of the implications of bankruptcy, or perhaps what are some of the alternatives that I feel would benefit you, stick around. Hey, what's up everybody? Tarafdar back with a brand new video. Today we're going to talk about bankruptcy. Before we get started, if you're new to this channel, you haven't subscribed, consider subscribing and turning the notifications on to all so that every time there's new videos like these, you'll be first to be watching. Also at the same time, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below on every single video so that I know you're watching. Perhaps you might have a question in reference to the exact video. I'll be able to answer them and hopefully get back to you to give you some clarity. With that said, let's get started on today's topic. So before you file for bankruptcy, there are certain things that you need to understand. We're going to talk about a few points in this video, but the first rule of thumb is understanding if you're insolvent, right? That's the biggest thing that we need to consider. So what does insolvency mean? So in a business sense, insolvency essentially means that you're no longer able to operate because you cannot meet your financial obligations. That's a given, right? But on a personal sense, that also means that you are unable to continue your minimum payments, you're unable to continue adhering to the debt policies and the agreements that you have signed or have perhaps engaged in. And that also means that you're going to be in a financial deficiency, being that you won't have the capacity to be able to pay that, which will in turn put you in a situation where you're uncomfortable financially and stressing you to a point where it wouldn't make any sense for you to continue paying that debt. So first, you need to identify whether or not your situation pertains to insolvency. Now, bankruptcy practitioners, those who take your file before you go to bankruptcy, obviously go through a trustee, they verify your situation, they look at your income, your assets, and they determine whether or not we can file for bankruptcy petition. During those instances, they're going to go through a list of your expenses, your income, and your assets. So before you go to those trustees, before you make the decision to file bankruptcy, you need to understand whether or not your situation is an informed insolvent, right? If it's a way that we look at your situation and it's just that, hey, it's just an uncomfortable situation, but you're still able to meet that debt obligation, you might not qualify for bankruptcy. So the first thing you need to understand is really understanding the situation or whether or not you're actually insolvent. And that really is going to help you kind of put together a situation where, okay, yeah, this is a bankruptcy, this is a legitimate bankruptcy, and you are in fact insolvent and you are not able to meet your payment obligations, in which in turn, in this situation, you basically file for bankruptcy, right? So a lot of people don't realize that. First, understand your insolvency situation and verify whether or not it's a legitimate bankruptcy situation. Don't just go ahead and file for bankruptcy because it's an easy route, right? End result is you're still going to get asked those questions in reference to your assets, income, and of course your overall expenses. So might as well do it ahead of time. So that's the first thing I wanted to kind of point out for you guys. The next thing we're going to talk about is the consequence on your credit reporting, right, of bankruptcy, or filing bankruptcy. Now we know that generally speaking, a bankruptcy can stay on your file from 7 to 10 years, depending on the type of bankruptcy, whether Chapter 7, 11, and so on and so forth. Obviously, there's many different variations of bankruptcy, but that's the implication on a credit reporting standard, right? One of the biggest things that people need to realize is that bankruptcy is a public record. Once you file bankruptcy, it's going to be on a public record. Anybody can look you up, put your name on the information, so long as they have access to PACER, which is a government web search in reference to public records, full disclosures, and they just need to understand where you lived, the state you lived in, your full and your first and last name, and efficiently just pull up records about you that went through a court system. This also includes bankruptcy, and that's something that you need to be aware of. So a lot of people think if you remove it off the credit report that you can just simply go out there and apply for funding and you'll be okay. And the reality to that is court systems is a public situation, right? It's not something that you can avoid, and you cannot get rid of PACER because that's just government enforced, and it's a record-keeping website and of course a database, and that's unlimited. It doesn't go any time. There's no statute of limitation. It doesn't disappear. So you need to know that. So if you're filing bankruptcy, you are basically putting yourself in that record, and this is true for if you're building up wealth in the future. So there's a situation where, I go through something called wealth banking, private, and that's when you have a certain asset income, and a threshold of assets, and A verification process during that time is they check if you have bankruptcy. It doesn't matter if you're 40 years ago or 20 years ago, all this information is verifiable. And you have to justify as to why you filed bankruptcy. And that's just on asset allocation, and that's just on private wealth banking. But there's also situations where you might have to go through an investor to raise some capital, perhaps for a real estate syndication, or perhaps you're doing something that you need investment capital, obviously following SEC rules and protocols. But at the same time, an investor's due diligence process may require, well, they have to investigate you. And if they look at that, your credit report might look nice and glitzy and glamorous, but at the end of the day, if they search up your information on a public record database, especially Pacer, and most sophisticated investors, even on the basic level, will have access to that, there's bankruptcy that's going to show up. There's dangers to that. The reason I say that is because let's assume that these are really wealthy investors and their business partners have been one of the creditors that you file bankruptcies against. And they find the list of creditors based on the public record information, which is accessible, by the way. Then they'll feel not so inclined to do business with you. And then you'll end up playing a defensive game instead of trying to get the investors on board. So that's just one way of looking at it. So this is public record information. Now, the reason I'm stating all this information to you guys is because a lot of you guys think, hey, I'll just go out there and get funding, clean up my bankruptcy, and just rebuild my credit. Credit can only get you so far. You cannot get $1 million in credit just because you filed bankruptcy yesterday and you just decided to clean it up. Even the highest of standard of people who are really well off in terms of credit and have maintained it for over two decades or even 3 decades could barely get a couple of $100,000. So if you really want to establish wealth, and by the way, the more you borrow, the more you have to pay on that. There's interest rates on top of that. So you're not getting free money. You're actually losing money because a dollar has an interest that's attached to it when you borrow it. So if you want to build wealth, you have to do it based on equity structures. You have to do it based on getting out of the debt. You look at the economy today, there's a lot of debts out there, and a lot of businesses are not going to go back, including major brands like, Gold's Gyms and a series of other franchises. So think about that situation, okay? So essentially, a lot of people think you fix your credit, you get some funding, and you're good to go. In a bankruptcy situation, you're putting yourself in a public database that's going to be for perpetuity. Basically, it's going to last there. It's going to stay there for a very long time. Now, there's nothing you can do about that or get rid of. But here's the thing. If you look at your personal situation and you look at the fact that, perhaps you're insolvent and you cannot afford to pay that debt, there's alternatives that you can take. One of the biggest alternatives is I highly recommend is try to negotiate with your creditors. A lot of people think, I just have to call and they won't work with me. It's not the truth. If you can maintain and demonstrate to them that you've been maintaining your minimum payments, that you're having difficulty and you're going to miss a few payments, and because of the COVID-19, which is a situation that everybody's going through, it's completely understandable, and you tell them you are no longer being able to meet the minimum payment requirements, most of these credit card companies and unsecured companies will have access to programs that you can tap into so that the affairs of that business stays within its business. It doesn't go outside. And what I mean by outside is if you have a bankruptcy petition, now the courts get involved and third-party trustees get involved. If you go through a debt settlement situation, attorneys get involved, and credit counseling services get involved. And it's just a whole, cluster of all these type of things that are happening, which a creditor feels extremely uncomfortable with. However, if you take the approach to deal with the creditors directly, they have programs that they can actually completely reduce your interest rate and settle it in-house and close out that account because they know for sure, we don't want to take a risk, but we'll definitely close it out, keep it the way it is, and then basically pay it down in a period of 4 to 5 years, even sometimes 6, with an installment plan that's at least 1/3 or even half of the minimum payment you have with that creditor on a maxed out capacity. So there's just so much things that you can do, but you have to be willing to reach out to that creditor. Now, part of getting into those programs requires for you to have some sort of analysis based on your income, assets, and of course liabilities. That's why I was saying determine at the first step to see whether or not you're actually insolvent. This will get you to a point where you'll be able to realize what are some of the options you have. Bankruptcy is not always the answer. Unfortunately though, there's a lot of people who have gone through bankruptcy without having gone through this video or understanding it, and at that point it's kind of too late for you. However, there's obviously steps that you can do to rebuild your credit post this bankruptcy stage. But at the beginning, if you've stumbled upon this video and you were considering bankruptcy and you're just wondering to yourself, what are my options? Then listen to the advice I just gave you. There are programs internally with financial institutions that you can access, but you have to take the effort to make sure that you reach out to them and let them know your situation so they can help you to the best of their ability. So that's one of those points I wanted to mention. So my final thoughts on all this, right, is just that, look, there's just so many options out there. You have to choose what's right for you. You have to choose what's right for your financial situation. Maybe you're at a point where your ends meet and you're pushed against the wall and you're basically unable to continue with any type of payment obligations because you just feel stressed out financially. Your capacity has been, shut down because you possibly have been laid off or your job is just at risk and you just want to preserve your capital to protect your family. Maybe bankruptcy would be the option for you. But if there are things that you can do to kind of avoid it, try to delay the inevitable and just try to work your situation out where you can actually work with a creditor instead of affecting your credit the long term, right? So I just wanted to share this quick video with you guys about bankruptcy and its long-term consequences. And prior to filing bankruptcy, I want you to watch this and apply the steps that I gave you so that at least you can save yourself the long-term headaches. And by the way, by working with creditors directly, you're actually avoiding the 7 to 10 year period to restructure your credit. And you have a lot more confidence with creditors because they'll see, based on the credit reporting snapshot and your performance on it, that you were willing to negotiate and work with creditors instead of taking the business outside to a third party, which in turn a lot of creditors don't like. So I hope this video gave you some insights and some helpful strategies to help you understand and consider whether or not bankruptcy is the right thing for you. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, consider subscribing, turning the notifications on to all, so every time there's new videos like these, you'll be first to be notified. And of course, leave me a comment below on some of the things that you would do if you were considering filing bankruptcy. And if you haven't, if you enjoyed what I shared with you, let me know by leaving a feedback below so that we can have a discussion and potentially share this video, perhaps with somebody that you know or think that might be considering this, and perhaps they can get some value from this. With that said, this is your guide and mentor, Ali Tarafdar. Catch you guys on the next one. Bye for now.